one.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny panel, and good evening to everybody present. Firstly, you may be wondering why I'm chairman for the meeting today, and that's because our illustrious chairman, Councillor Mundy, is on paternity leave and enjoying his 2 weeks of paternity. So we wish him, his wife and his new baby well, and we look forward to seeing them again in due course. So moving on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Councillor Mundy is away today, and in his place we have Councillor Cowper. So thank you very much for attending. And we have a new member of the committee, Councillor Ward. So welcome to Councillor Ward. And do we have any other apologies for absence?
Chair, there's an apology for delay to Geraldine Stanford. She's having difficulty getting in.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, a mobile has just joined. I think it might be Councillor Stanford.
Is that Councillor Stanford? No, it's
No.
not. Okay, so we'll try Councillor Stanford in a few moments, and we'll carry on. So item 2, does anybody have any declarations of pecuniary interest? I take that as a no. Thank you very much. And then we'll go on to agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments on those? And can we take those as a correct record of the meeting? Take that as yes, thank you very much. Assuming there's no matters of arising either. No, excellent, thank you. Okay, so that brings us on to item 4, the update from ID Verdi, a verbal update from John Bosley. We also have a guest, Richard Burton from ID Verdi. So I'd like to hand over to John and Richard to give us an update on the ID Verdi contract, and then we'll have questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a presentation to present, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, that'd be good, please. Can Rosie sort of load that up for us, please?
Share my screen.
Rosie, can I just interrupt to say I keep being logged off of the
We'll log you back in, mate. Don't you worry.
Oh, I will. If there's any problem,
Moses in charge. Nothing can go wrong.
Are you seeing the presentation?
yes, the presentation's loaded now, so thank you, John.
I just need to see what I'm showing. So I assume it's the first slide. Is it moving?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Okay, I can't quite see it.
You're on the second slide, John.
Say again?
You're on the second slide now.
Second slide. Okay, thank you.
John,
yeah.
would it be helpful if I shared it instead? Would that be easier
Yeah,
for
probably
you?
would be. It would be probably best, just so I can see it.
Okay, no problem. Give me
Thank
just sorry.
you.
Just,
My apologies with the technology. Thank you very much, Rosie.
no problem.
So the basis of this presentation is an update from the meeting that we had on the 20th of September of last year that went to Cabinet with recommendations on the 9th of November last year. The first slide is I just want to frame where we are as a service. It was this slide is about the roadmap to our recovery for our service as a whole. These are the stages that we've gone through during this period, and this represents the various different lockdowns that we've had, both nationally and from a tiering perspective in London over the course of this time. Having great pleasure from the 8th of March and transitioning to this easing of lockdown stages, which allows us to work toward this new normal. Thank you. In terms of the challenges over the last 6 months, if I could just broadly say that in 4 main areas that have impacted the service. The first has been looking at the standard operational modifications that we've had to make within the service as a whole. For example, a lot of our activity in parks and green spaces is about being mobile. During this period of lockdown and restrictions, we've had to be less mobile in a way, in terms of we have a limited number of vehicles and resources where we've had to plan those out in different ways because we couldn't have the same number of operatives in those vehicles doing work in the same way. So we've had to reprofile how work is undertaken and how efficient we could be doing that work due to the social distancing requirements there. The second is the government guidance and restrictions that have been imposed in that roadmap above, and those various off and on. We had lockdowns, we came out of lockdowns, we've had tier 4 restrictions, then further lockdowns. During those stages, each of those stages, we've had to turn off and on different aspects of our parks and green spaces, the facilities and infrastructure that people go there to use and enjoy. That is meant that some locations we've had to remove basketball hoops, lock tennis courts, and even playgrounds at a certain stage. And we have to keep maintaining those facilities during these lockdown periods. This is a further strain on what was our business as normal model in terms of the work that was undertaken. We also have to be aware of the personnel impacts that have occurred. As with any local business, it's the impact on staff that is probably has been the hardest felt. And that's not just in terms of personal sickness, but it's also with a large workforce, there is elements of shielding, as well as, the impacts that people have with their families at home and how that impacts the business overall. But overall, in point 4, I think the importance is that we've operated very good, sustained delivery of service over this period. We've been there for our communities, and we've had an open and available parks and green spaces within the restrictions that were imposed. In terms of our performance overall, and this was a recommendation from the meeting in September, it was about presenting data to the committee on a quarterly basis. And what I'd like to share is the next 2 slides, which looks at from a performance quality management system, which is the embedded performance system within the contract, on the outturn. And I've clarified this in terms of the feature qualities that we assess in terms of their of how the service provider is performing. And what I can demonstrate is in Q3, the overall grade was 5.10 in terms of the PQMS score, which is within optimum contract specification. And I've showed a radiograph there to demonstrate areas, anything inside the red line are areas of weakness that we would like to explore a bit further as part of our routine contract management. So for example, in Q3, planters and memorial sites were the issues that we'd like to further explore with ID Verde. Next slide, please. So in Q4, Q4, what we can see here is that we had 5.10 again, but we've had some further improvement in terms of planters. I remember that conversation This is during the wintering period, and we had some additional work by ID Verde to improve some of the planters over this period. We're still weak in terms of memorial feature qualities assessment in the parks, and these are areas that we will still further look at in improving with ID Verde's performance. Another recommendation was improvements in reporting as a whole. And I just wanted to share these next two slides, which are some of the changes since November that we've installed in the system to further embed better performance management of the contract as a whole. What you see in this slide here is the weekly dashboard. The weekly dashboard is a dashboard of the assessments that we make for our parks, depending on the different features, as well as in the top right corner, you'll see the radiograph, which is specifically about grass verges. And the bottom table is the more formal PQMS contract monitoring, which occurred during that week's period. This is presented to the cabinet member on a weekly basis, and we talk about and discuss the issues that are occurring in our parks and green spaces. Next slide. At the end of the month, we then collate all of those dashboards with the commentary from the service manager into a monthly report, which then pulls together that information and allows us to expand on areas of work which we are managing as part of the service. This formed part of the formal process for our client team to report on the performance of ID Verde as a whole. And then this slide is demonstrating this process overall. So we start with slide one, or section one, which is we establish as part of our annual review what the PQMS scoring is and what we are going to monitor as a service. In section two, we complete the weekly dashboard, which then in three lends itself to the monthly service reporting. 4, which will be the quarterly updates to this committee. And then 5, we will have the annual performance review at the end of the year to then go into that phase and sustained and ongoing basis. In terms of, this is pardon me, somebody's phoning me. In terms of this slide, this is to outline some of the detail about the PQMS element within the contract and I've spent a lot of time researching this to get rid of any ambiguity in respect to that. And this, I just wanted to state that in terms of the PQMS score, it's from 1 to 7. Contractually, the assessed values between 4 and 4.99 are compliant, but 5 and above meets the desired contract standard, which is considered optimal. Agreed annually as part of the contract, we'll have 250 random inspections of locations. However, there may be several or multiple features at any of those locations that we check. So in some locations, we may have 20 different features that we inspect as part of the 250 random location inspections. There is a financial sum which is kept each month as part of an incentive. And then what we do is we calculate the outturn of the PQMS score. If this value is above 4, what that percentage is as a figure between 4 and 5 is payable as a PQMS bonus parameter, is payable as a performance bonus to the operational staff. So this year it was of that value retained, it was about 80%, and that would have translated to a cashable performance related bonus to operational staff. due to the outturn of the PQMS score, which was 4.8 over this time. And I know there will be lots of queries in respect to that, but this will help provide some light. In terms of what another aspect of the recommendations was to develop a tree strategy. This just kind of highlights the elements to the tree strategy. So we've gone to the marketplace and have engaged with a consultant at this stage, have yet to instruct the consultant, but an element of that will be we have the components that we want to be addressed. We have a project overview plan that we would like them to deliver to. And these elements are what would be considered in our tree strategy, which is elements working with partnership, making sure that it complements strategies that we have. We have regional and local plans that it needs to feed into. It needs to manage risk as well as address our operational needs of the service. It needs to tie in with our information technology and how we use information, and including mobile technologies. We need to ensure that we have the right tree assets, and that's the right tree in the right place, as well as ensuring that we're improving our canopy cover. And it needs to address our investment. So how do we sustain our current needs and the future investment to maintain our arboricultural stock within the borough? So that's something that has been progressing and that we would like to see happen within the first 2 quarters of this year. The next one, which is developing system in terms of dealing with the recommendation of one-stop reporting system. And this would be opening our channels for our service users and improving access to reporting, especially in our public spaces. So when people are out in our streets and in their communities, as well as our parks, is making it easier for them to report on issues. So this is something that we're actively pursuing as we speak. I've had a conversation today and the day before, and one last week as well. So this is something that is currently being looked at from our internal governance review. We have had case examples of different systems that could possibly deliver this, and we're currently working with our colleagues and information systems to look at how we can best and apply this, and if it's right for us with the solutions that we're currently looking at. But elements that will help will be making it easier, improving our transparency. It will allow us to have better use of reported data for our own internal teams to manage our contract and services well. It will improve the field reporting of issues, and that's not just for the council workers. That is also for our key stakeholders. So friends of parks, our street champions. It will improve what they can report on and will give them an extra layer of confidence and being part of our system and ensuring that we are doing the best for our communities. And then some aspects which we were unable to progress on due to some of the lockdown conditions were in respect to in the recommendations was meeting, going out, visiting our local parks, having some working groups and looking at the how the service is monitored and the process flows behind that, which form part of the recommendations. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to go to that degree, but we'd be more than, this is your invitation, we'd be more than happy in around the June period to arrange for those visits to occur. And we could, probably get a bus from our team in transport and go visit a few locations if that's agreeable. And then thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. That's a helpful update. Did Richard from ID really have any comments, or you just want to take questions if any get directed towards you?
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions, Chair. I guess just to reiterate what John was saying, it has been a very challenging year with COVID. I mean, nothing as important really as our staff well-being. Just to give you some information, our staff sickness has increased by 79% on 2019 figures, and that peaked in March, April, June, and January. So a direct correlation really to COVID. As John said, we because it's been a sort of moving feast. We went down to 2 people in a vehicle. We brought in additional vehicles from other contracts so that we could continue to deliver the service. We rerouted, a number of colleagues to stop doing their normal tasks and to assist in other areas. So guys and girls that were working in fine turf moved those to helping in cemetery operations, be that grass cutting or undertaking additional training. And likewise, as John said, doing things like opening, closing, Mugas, outdoor gyms, etc. It's been quite. Although there's been less activity, it's been a very active parks and open spaces in the last 12 months.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. Yes, and I'd like to thank your staff as well for everything they've managed to achieve, because parks have been exceptionally heavily used over the last year, and I recognise all the strain that you've had to do. So thank you for that. So in terms of questions, I think the first hand that I saw was Councillor Nick Draper. So Nick, please.
Yeah, just to say, I've got to say that was a good report, and John, thank you very much indeed for that. And Richard, obviously, ID Verde have been proving that that you are definitely the service to be used. Which I'm glad that I had confidence in you, and it's given results, and that's fantastic. I've got 2 questions. First of all, the exodus to the parks last year, which is going to be replicated, of course, this year. How, in terms of the behaviour of residents and litter, how did you cope with that, Richard? And the other one is slightly different. It's on memorials that John touched on. I was at a planning meeting the other night, and the Rose Garden in Dundonald Park is a memorial. It's a Holocaust memorial, and one of the panelists actually said, "Yeah, well, it may be a Holocaust memorial, but it's not a very good Holocaust memorial. It's not," which I thought was a bit tasteless. But are we paying attention to things like that? Those are my 2 questions, Jack. Thanks.
Chair, if I can answer the first question in relation to litter. I mean, yes, Councillor Draper, you're quite right. The amount of waste, obviously, in parks and open spaces has increased. And as I said before, we have tried to work with the problem in partnership with Merton to move colleagues to undertake more litter picking than perhaps they would normally have done in their scheduled work, to try and ensure that parks remain as clean and presentable as possible, given, as you say, they've been so widely used across across the borough.
I would add, Chair, in respect to the new year, we will be looking at ways where if we can have improved local storage, and if that is working with my colleagues in the waste team to provide more local storage for collected litter during that stage, we will be doing that. And we have also included some improved local signage asking park users to take the litter home with them. And that's something that we've done with some large banners in more high profile parks. And we've included it with our current range of COVID related park information boards that came out as part of the easing of lockdown restrictions during this most recent stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So I've seen one of those big banners on Mustang Gardens, so yeah, very good. Was a good question from Anthony Fairclough next, I've seen, and then after that, Dave Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, John and the John, I wondered if I might come back on the scoring, the contractual scoring, just to clarify a question. I think it's the slide said that there were 250 inspections in a year, but that the scores are calculated monthly. So I just wondered if you might give us a bit of detail on how those two things kind of tally together.
Contractually, there are 250 agreed inspections a year. There will be, so that long, pardon me for a second. The long list that I showed in the screen, that would all be one inspection of the 250. So there's multiple facets, which are the features that we would inspect. That smaller table in the weekly report is why it's a smaller table. It's only a few inspections, because that will, over the course of over the 52 weeks, will roll into the 250 inspections. In addition to that, we also undertake similar inspections based on a 1 to 7 scoring regime of feature qualities, which we have put as an additional layer on top of that, what we don't do is roll that into the numerical scoring of the PQMS number. So all we do is look at the 250 scores that we had. In the last slide, where it was the invitation to come and see us, I put a picture of the handheld scoring device that we use, which is part of the PQMS service offered as part of the contractual relationship with ID Birdie. So basically, we have a 2-layered system where we do local scoring from the client team, and across the South London Waste Partnership contract with Merton and Sutton using the PQMS system, we have the contractual scoring mechanism, which we report on, because that is the agreement between the parties in the contractual and within the contract, which is both Merton Sutton and ID Birdie relationship. It's quite nuanced, as you can see, but what we tried to do is provide that additionality in it to ensure that we do have that rigor within the scoring. I think another aspect of the scoring, which isn't maybe misunderstood, is that the scoring is based on the approach in N195 surveying, very similar to what you would see in the Code of Practice of Litter and Refuse, that where the outturn of the score should be based on a lay person observing what that outturn is. So it isn't about how many centimeters the bulbs are planted between each other. It is about going to that feature and saying, generally, does this reasonably, is this of a good standard? That's why you will see scoring around the 5 mark being acceptable. 7 at the top end is very technical, and that would achieve something where that is then aiming on perfection. So that's why there is a wider range within that scoring.
Thank you. I think obviously a very complex thing, but there's about 20 inspections a month or thereabouts to make up the 250. Is that correct? That's sort of broadly. Yeah.
But that's only the tip of the iceberg, because in addition to that, we would do So for example, verges, grass verges also get assessed when we do, when we inspect street cleansing. So we will do around 1,400 inspections a month on street cleansing. If that street has a grass verge, we will also inspect that. So we have a lot of additionality built into our system. We have, based on our street cleansing inspections, our target operating model is to ensure that we visit every road in the borough at least monthly. So that is every cul-de-sac, every street that an council officer has been in that road once a month. That would also, they can't have their blinkers on and only look at the street or the footpath. They will also be assessing the grass verge, which is the predominance of work that ID Verde do, if you look up at in terms of square meterage, is verge maintenance. So we have that additionality to ensure that they're delivering on that.
Okay, thank you. Dave Ward now, please.
Thank you. I've got a brief question, really, and it's about communication. There's been a couple of times recently in Collierswood. We had a new swing installed in Collierswood Rec, which we had requested, and it was installed, and we didn't know it had happened until, you know, a friend of mine happened to walk past and told me, oh, it's in. And just this week, one of the major bridges on Wandle Park has been taped off and can't be used. I'm assuming for regular maintenance work. The question really is about communications. I don't mean tell us councillors or tell the community every time you mow a verge, but if something quite major happens, like closing down a bridge for a few days, it would be, I think, really useful if either through social media channels or letting the councillors know, so that we can then let our residents know why, for instance, a bridge has been closed for a few days, rather than just doing it and not telling anybody about it. I mean, it will just help to keep people happier than they are already. Thank you.
Chair, if I could address that, I think that is an identified weakness, and I acknowledge that, and I'm aware of that weakness. We do need to improve upon that. We have been doing probably the not so high, the things in the back office first. We've been fixing those systems first, but in terms of us having a better, more efficient way of dealing with key stakeholders and as well as ward members, that's something that I'm very aware of, because we should be engaging in respect to that. And the bridge is a perfect example. I just sent an email out before this meeting where I said, once we know when it will be fixed, can you please let ward members and the Friends of Wandle Park be aware of that, so they're aware of that time when it will be fixed. As part of a restructure, I will be putting in place a coordinated role who will help in terms of dealing with our street champions and our Friends of Parks in terms of making it a bit more coordinated in that approach, and also making everybody responsible and ensure that we're giving both good news and bad news to our stakeholders during this process to keep people informed.
Yes, thank you for that, John. It's something that I experienced before as well, and it's a frustration that most members here have is actually being the last to find out, and people ask us first. So any information would always be helpful. We have a hands up from Nick. So Nick Paper, please.
Cheers. It's a plea more than anything else, and this is not a criticism, far from it. Every year, when it gets hot, when people start using the parks and the paddling pools and everything like that, there's rubbish gets strewn over the grass, which I was talking about before. Richard talked about it, John talked about it, and the thing from the public that comes across saying, we need more bins, we do need more bins, we've got to have more bins, etc. And we all know that you don't need more bins, you just need people who are respecting our parks and everything like that. How can we get the message across that just putting in additional bins does not solve the problem? It's a plea, it's a question.
It's a, Chair, if you don't mind, it's a That's why when I discussed working with my colleagues in waste, I preface it with providing containers for storing waste elsewhere, because I agree with you. In my many years of experience, just dotting around further bins around the park doesn't actually resolve the matter. I need to work with ID Verde to make sure the regularity of emptying of containers is there. That's important. And that if we have additionality in the park, and that is, any sort of extracurricular park activity, that they are also aware of their responsibility for waste management and increasing and providing waste containment and dealing with the waste that arises from that. But what we also need to do is put something in place which will allow ID Verde to work more efficiently by collecting things in situ, but storing them on site, because often what they struggle with is having the additional vehicles to operate between the multiple sites, where what we can do is store waste on site for our larger parks and have that collected by a third-party vehicle. If that works better within the system, that's something we will look at doing to ensure that I try to cut off the angles that ID Verde may present me as barriers to keeping the park clean of litter. So Richard's sitting over there, as I understand, and we'll be working together to do the best we can. I do understand that sometimes if the weather does change and it gets really sunny, there's not a lot that we can do other than advertise that people should be mindful of this open space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll go to David Dean next.
Thank you very much. What was the council's view on the independent Merton Green Spaces report that was sent to officers, the 2021 report that was sent to officers? And I have a follow-up on that as well.
Thank you very much for raising that. I think that's important and not forgotten. As part of the recommendations from last year is we would be bringing the annual reports to this committee. We are still within the annual review stage at this minute with ID Verde. So a week ago, I had my first initial meeting with them where they presented their operational report, and I have an additional meeting with them to discuss their forward plans for the operational year. Once that annual report is signed off, we will be coming back to the committee to present that report and tandem with the one offered by the Independent Merton Green Spaces Forum as part of the recommendations from the panel.
Because I think, John, I think one of the issues is that, of course, the council commissioned ID Verde originally, mm-hmm. and are now the scorers of the contract. And I don't have any better information than what the Merton Green Spaces Forum are telling council officers and councillors. And I accept that all of these things are qualitative. There's nothing we could never quantify. But I mean, they raised two major issues. They got responses from a number of friends groups, and generally the average was between acceptable and unacceptable when things could have been excellent or good. Specifically here, Cannon Hill Common, the mandatory processes were unacceptable. And same as Canizaro Park. And also the report talks about a lack of horticultural knowledge. Again, this is, I don't know as much as these people do, but there is an impression that some of the people who are doing the work are not trained, and they're just following, procedures, and nature isn't like that. They have to work properly. So do you think that the review is valid, and do you think you can remove some of those unacceptable scores? And the last question is maybe they can do the scoring system for you. It would be cheaper for you and maybe perceived as more objective.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of issues within that too. If I looked at, and I'm recalling it because I don't have it up in front of me, if you look at the scoring that they have within their report, and you align that to the scoring that I have presented as what is acceptable and not acceptable, all of those reds go. So the whole construct in the whole reference to that report changes shape. I really do agree that work with ID Verde and friends groups is paramount in developing these relationships. We have people in our key parks who have been in those parks for years and have expert horticultural experience and knowledge. It's how I pose that to Richard on how we can develop those relationships. So we're working more in partnership rather than against each other is what I have constantly discussed with Richard and Richard's new contract director. That is what I'm interested in this year coming forward is how we better work with the people involved in this. And that is, and rather than just going out and grading something and giving a report card in, it's actually having constructive conversations with the people who are in the park doing the job with the friends groups and developing those relationships. So we have better outcomes overall. That is where I want to push ID Verde to improve those relationships. I know that they, for example, in the recent work we did in reviewing their draft annual report, I know that they've invested over £25,000 in outsourced training to improve that with their staff, even during COVID. So I know that there's an investment and acknowledgement of those issues that have been identified. But that is something that we want to proceed with and develop going forward. So we will address that in the further meeting when we give a presentation on the annual report, and that's something that we do want to develop.
Okay, thank you. And I'm conscious that Councillor Stanford has now joined the call and has been listening in. So, Geraldine, do you have a question or anything you want to raise at this time?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Well, to say that the situation with the monitoring and the implementation of the contract is complex, I think is a bit of an understatement. It's extremely challenging. You know, I'm still trying to get my head around all the various figures and the way things have been operating. And several people have already mentioned some of the things that have concerned me throughout the past few years with the ID Verde contract. I'm not sure if this has been picked up already. I don't think it has. It wasn't particularly in the report, but I've had particular problems with ID Verde before the pandemic and all that stuff started, with their relationship with the traffic and highways team that often when they're undertaking work, as they have been in my ward in Mitcham Town Centre around the Fairgreen, and also on Figs Marsh on the roads around Figs Marsh open space. Where when they finished the work, the actual physical work, the roadworks and stuff, ID Verde have been contracted to clear up the curbs, the grass curbs, or replant them, like the one in Holborn Way that has been a central carriageway, a central island of weeds, waist high, for the past 3 years since that contract finished and part of the Rediscover Mitcham contract. And on Figs Marsh itself, where the raised flower bed was reduced. The raised flower bed has been there for many years at the south end of the marsh, near where the roundabout was. And it has been maintained and planted and looked after by the Friends of Figs Marsh and the North Mitcham Parks Friends group for many years, planting it, bulbs, plants, maintaining it, watering, all those sorts of things already themselves, not by the council or anybody else, apart from the odd chopping down shrubs and things unnecessarily in some cases. But after the work on the roundabout was finished, as I say, again, the ID Verdi were contracted to clear out the raised bed, to replant the shrubs and bulbs and other flowers and things that had been taken out and disposed of, and that was 2 years ago, and they still haven't been done. Now, the Friends of Figs Marsh and the Friends and the North Mitcham Park Friends have said on several occasions in the interim that we have got a little bit of money left in our funds. We would have been prepared to go along and replant the flower bed ourselves with our volunteers. But speaking to the highways, traffic and highways guys who commissioned the work, they said, no, you shouldn't do that. ID Verdi have been contracted to do it, so therefore you shouldn't take it on, otherwise they will get away without fulfilling the contract. So we've held off, and we're still waiting. So it's a relationship between, traffic and highways, which obviously, as I say, you say, contains a lot of grass verges, and ID Verdi, have you got a good relationship? Because you don't seem to be kind of, corresponding, with each other, or certainly ID Verdi not with traffic and highways, because I know they've been, chasing it up for a long time now, and it's a similar case with the leaf clearing, where leaves on Figs Marsh, which has got a lot of trees, as you know, most of you, blow onto the nearby roads surrounding the marsh, and highways come along and they clear the actual path bit, but they don't leave, they don't touch any debris or anything that's in the green verges, and ID Verdi say, well, it's not their place to clear the leaves on the roads and the grass verges, because they're only responsible for the trees on the marsh. Now, we can't stop the leaves blowing around, somebody needs to use a bit of common sense here, because we have this problem every year around Figs Marsh, around the edges, where the side roads around it are clogged up with leaves that are blown from the marsh, and are frequently, not cleared up unless we push them, onto them every day, chasing it up.
Okay, well, thank you, Geraldine. I think John has got the point. If you have a quick comment, and then I'll go to one final question from Anthony, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Stanford. If you could send me any of those details, I will help join those up in the background. My colleague James McGinley's here. We've had separate conversations about ensuring the better transfer of assets that we develop as part of highway schemes, where they move from a project within the development in a highway scheme to a green spaces asset that needs to be then managed ongoing, and how we can better improve that, and we can have better communication between the different service areas within the department. That's something we need to join up in terms of communication, and we've already kind of noted that on some other issues that we're looking at improving. But your information would be most helpful in correcting that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. I will send you a list of bits and pieces that I've got. Yeah, certainly.
Okay, thank you, Geraldine. Now, Anthony Fairclough, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two very quick questions, if I may. The first was to say thank you to John for talking about the one-stop shop for reporting and the improvements that are hopefully going to come up that way. As part of that, I wanted to check that the ability of councillors and friends groups to report things will be included in that, because at the moment it can be quite opaque. I don't know if there's any more detail on that, or if it's just a simple yes at the moment. And my second question was actually harking back to the emptying of litter bins, and it's maybe a question for Richard. But are there increased collections over sort of obvious times like bank holiday weekends and that kind of thing? I know my councillor sort of email is more likely to be full of complaints about full bins over bank holiday weekends.
Yeah, from a scheduling perspective, not only do we at a weekend, obviously we've got a full rota across the borough at weekends, but it will also depend on the weather to some degree. So if we know it's going to be fantastic weather, then obviously we'll endeavour to manage that effectively by bringing in additional resource, or certainly into the busier parks where required. So yeah, we do look at all the factors, and then yes, try and manage it as as best we can.
In terms of your question about use by friends groups and councillors, we will have a super user sort of aspect to the solution that we're investigating, which will give some additional functionality to those users. Typically, those type of users report on areas, and they report on multiple streams. It will give them further insight to what they are reporting and the progress of those jobs.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. In terms of ending, no more questions now. We'll take you up on your offer about doing a visit in June or July time. We'll coordinate that through Rosie, and we'll coordinate with your team in due course.
Dan, could I just ask one thing? I would like to make a proposal that the Independent Green Spaces Forum, given the opportunity to pilot the council's measurement scheme for the council, saving council some funds, to see if that can work. So we've got a third party measuring ID Verde.
John, do you care to comment on that? Is that something that can be done at this stage, or is that something we should look at separately?
I would think initially at this stage, I'm currently divisionally going through a restructure and have yet to realign my business or the business of public spaces, how it needs to be for the future. I think it would add further complexity. They have done work with ID Verde in the past in terms of scoring, and I know Richard's team have worked with friends groups about scoring and providing that information. It as per the officer scoring can be additionality, as long as they have been trained accordingly and we have gone through that process. We can then take their additional scoring as part of the measure that we input into the quarterly reporting that goes to committee. I'd be happy to do that at this stage. What I don't want to do is further add the complexity that I don't think at this stage is needed, because we have put some rigorous processes in place in terms of assuring we're getting these outturns.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm happy to finish there. Well, thank you, John and Richard, for your time, and we'll let you go, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the Merton Adult Education Annual Report. Can we have a brief update from Anthony Hopkins, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Just a quick update. So as per usual, presenting the Merton Adult Learning annual report. Just a reminder, this is an academic year report, so covering the period from August 2019 to July 2020. It was quite a successful year for the service. We were re-inspected by Ofsted and achieved a good overall outcome across all grading areas. And there's some details in the report that highlight that as well. That was obviously prior to the kind of the pandemic, and obviously the report provides a lot of detail and information around the impact of the pandemic and how our providers have responded to that through delivery of courses online, and delivery of new course provision in response to the kind of change in job market and skills needs of Merton residents. There's quite a lot of detail in there. And also just prior to the pandemic, Cabinet agreed our new adult learning strategic objectives, which sit quite nicely aligned actually to a lot of what we are looking to achieve over the next few years, where we've realigned things as a result of the pandemic. And the final point I just wanted to raise before I open up to questions is just the external funding that's coming into to the borough now, which we've been successful in applying for. So over £540,000 is now being invested into Merton residents, into looking at you know, the future job market, the future skill needs of residents, and adjusting the curriculum provision as a result of that. Some of that has already been delivered, and that will be a big part of what we're delivering over the next couple of years. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so thank you, Anthony. Excellent report, as usual. Thank you. So I'll open to questions. Does anybody have any questions to ask? David Dean.
Thank you, Anthony, and well done for your gong last year, by the way. Very good that you got that. Could you just elaborate a bit more on what kind of subjects are required and what sort of experience is the council putting in place or skills to deliver that? What sort of subjects are being requested these days to further people's careers and education?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I mean, it's a wide range of different kind of curriculum matters we're putting in. I think some of the things where there's been some change into the funding rules, obviously we receive for the funding for the service from the GLA and the ESFA, means that we'll be investing more in kind of level 3 provision in particular. So particularly around core skills around maths, English, digital literacy as well. What we're seeing in particular is the impact, from what we're seeing from the initial data, is the impact is particularly in terms of jobs, is particularly in our residents over 50 at the moment. So investing a lot in kind of provision around skills to retrain for that. Also actually doing quite a lot around just kind of job readiness, particularly amongst our younger cohort. So where they may have the kind of qualifications to move into employment, but not necessarily the job ready skills. So a lot around kind of what we call kind of skills academies. So one example being we have a skills academy around kind of particularly young people, but it's not open to all residents, around moving into the public sector and the kind of skills and acumen you would need within that as well. So we're doing kind of a lot around that. Also a lot around kind of ESOL as well. So for speakers of English as a second language, some of those were particularly affected as part of the pandemic, where they couldn't. I think the digital skills with the literacy skill, with the speaking skills come in quite hand in hand. So as well as kind of changing some of the provision around ESOL, we're also kind of doing a lot that more jointly around digital provision as well, and upskilling along the same lines. in terms of going forward, it's a kind of iterative process. So we're reviewing this and you know, we look at a lot of different data sources in terms of thinking about the curriculum going forward. You know, looking at the job market for the borough, looking at the kind of demand and skills kind of gaps that the employers are reporting, and from our learners as well. So it's kind of an ongoing process, but certainly something we've built up quite a lot over this last year.
Thank you, Anthony. Actually, that just led very nicely into my follow-up question, was that have you got research from your users on what kind of subjects they'd like? So you've talked about maths and English, and you talked about digitization, very much about jobs. But certainly over the years, we've had, you know, the other side of it, the flower arranging, the art, etc. What sort of do you do research each year to find out what kind of things they want?
Yes, absolutely, and obviously that's still quite a core part of the provision as well. We've got quite a significant creative arts element within the provision. I mean, what we find is a lot of the our learners are very happy. I mean, you'll see from the report the satisfaction levels that learners experience means that they really do enjoy the courses and what they're undertaking. Part of what we're particularly about is progression. So demonstrating that it's not just a club, it's a course, and that people are moving on to new things. So with some of the provision, it's actually more just about how the kind of curriculums aligned within the existing provision. But we are seeing some areas as well of particular demand or feedback. So one of the areas, for example, that we've had feedback from learners is just about more around kind of construction actually, and building and skills around that. So we're looking to commission some new provision in the next academic year around that as well.
Yes, I think for those that haven't seen the report, and I think everyone has, I mean, it is an amazing figure that the percentage of end of course evaluations where teaching and learning was rated as good and above at 99%, which is just unbelievable, unbelievably good.
Okay, thank you, David. Anthony Fairclough, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anthony, for the report. I wanted to touch on, if I may, in the report in sort of paras 1 and particularly para 2.2, there's a lot on the sort of strategic objectives set by the administration on where the service should be going. I wondered if more detailed KPIs sit under some of those strategic objectives, and if either if there's any more detail you can give us now, or maybe it's something you could kind of forward to us. There's a lot in here about this being sort of evidence-based, but there's what's not clear to me from the report is how some of these things are measured, or you know, how we're performing against these kind of strategic objectives. And then lastly, I wanted to come back. Para 2.5 talks about upskilling residents in key areas identified in the job market. Now, you touched on this in your answer to Councillor Dean. I wondered how employers fed into that. You mentioned that employers mentioned things, and I wondered as well, more generally, how things have changed in response to COVID. I mean, a lot of the strategic objectives kick in, you know, before COVID, and I wonder if any of the direction of service has changed. So apologies, that's 3 questions rolled into one, but there you are.
Oh, thank you. So just on the first question, so just with regards to the key performance indicators, so there's a summary of the kind of overall what we call the main basket of key performance indicators further down in the report. So they're kind of they're kind of the main indicators we use, but underneath that there's a whole tranche more of indicators. So probably on about, off the top of my head, I think it's about 40 to 50 separate indicators that support the evidence base around how we're achieving on those objectives. Also as well, we take them even more down to a further granular level, particularly around the different providers, because we're a commissioning service. We commission about 8-9 providers per year, and so we're looking at the kind of differences and trends within the providers as well. So there's quite a lot of information, and within the service plan that was recently produced as well, that gives a bit more detail as well around some of those underlying key performance indicators as well, that aren't just on the kind of main basket that we've reported on today. And then just moving on to the second question, which was about section 2.5, wasn't it? So just yeah, just with regards to that. So I mean, obviously, in terms of where we are, the kind of main overlying strategic objectives have actually set quite well in terms of the alignment of where we're going with the trajectory of the service. So I think even with what was being agreed, it probably actually, in many ways, actually gave us quite a good precursor to what we've experienced. And I think what is different now is probably just the rate of change that we're doing within the curriculum, where it would have been more of a gradual change, particularly when we talk about online provision, for example, where we've gone from, you know, almost 0% to about 70-80% within a year. That's kind of a big change, and the curriculum leads on with that. And in terms of the work that we do with employers and getting that kind of feedback from the data, so beyond the kind of GLA data and the Merton specific data we get around employment opportunities, you know, employment rates, etc., we also have an advisory panel which kind of sits kind of within the group, and it consists of representatives from the business sector, from the voluntary sector, and from the community sector, who feed in and give us that kind of external challenge around our plans and feed in around kind of the expectations and things they would like to see within the job market as well. And we test those kind of curriculum plans with them in particular. And yeah, just the last point around kind of the impact of COVID. Obviously, you know, one of the big kind of success stories has been the level of provision we've been able to move online, and that's been very successful. What we also have seen is that some, particularly those who kind of didn't have good quality access to digital, to computers and internet at home, have been a little bit left behind during the pandemic. So some of our investment has actually gone into equipment loaning schemes, digital skills training, and enabling people to get online. And also now, as we start to open up a bit more, bringing back more in-class provision where there is still very high demand for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nick Draper, please.
Cheers and congratulations, Anthony. I mean, you've taken what was a failing service and you've turned it into something that we can all be extremely proud of, regardless of all the things that have been chucked at you, be it COVID or be it the government or whatever. You know, I'm really pleased with how far we've got, how far you've got. One thing that you had a problem with that I'm very aware of was the delivery of special needs education for people with learning disabilities. How are you getting on with Richmond College, and is it now? Are you now satisfied with what you're getting?
Yeah, we're very thank you, Councillor Draper. We're very satisfied with the performance of Richmond Hillcroft Adult and Community College, who've actually just been recently shortlisted for a national award in the adult and community sector. So I think the work they've done has been very good. I think obviously what we've been particularly working on is improving the local offer. And part of that work has been particularly around our engagement with local carers groups and other interested organisations to actually generate a bit more interest and how it complements the wider offer as well. And I think what we're finding at the moment, which is very pleasing, is that the offer is generally regarded by the groups we've tested the provision with as good. It's highly regarded and it's in demand. What we need to do a bit more around is just continue to raise the awareness of that provision, and you know, encouraging parents and carers wherever possible to think local about what is now a very good quality provision, and was highlighted particularly in the Ofsted report. Just giving people those choices really around the local offer and drumming up the numbers.
Thank you. Geraldine, do you have a question or anything you want to raise at this point?
No, I don't think so at this point. Just to say thank you to Anthony for all the hard work that's got into that department and the results that have come out of it, and Jagong, of course, as well. Congratulations to that. I'm just very impressed, really, with the way you've been able to carry on most of the services as much as you have been. So well done.
Excellent, thank you for that. We'll go on to the next agenda item then, which is Libraries and Heritage Annual Report. That's Anthony Hopkins again, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as per usual, just presenting the annual Libraries and Heritage Service report. So using the usual format that we present to sustainable communities. So the report takes on the main headings of the DCMS's Libraries Deliver strategy for public libraries in England. This year in particular, we've made a particular emphasis on the kind of unprecedented kind of response and delivery we've taken to the pandemic, and talked through the kind of different stages of our modelling and response to the pandemic, and how we've kind of delivered services continuously throughout, and the kind of thoughts around recovery and where we're going with that. Also highlighting some of the sterling work that kind of staff in the libraries teams have done in terms of wider kind of community response work. So from manning the community response hub during the first lockdown, to supporting with the shielding services and lateral flow test centres and other kind of public health focused responses where their kind of skills have really shone through. Obviously, the year has had quite an impact on projects and performance in particular. So just the report gives a bit of a summary around the general impact around that, and some of the things and the projects moving forward that we're looking to implement as part of our recovery programs. So yeah, it's just a kind of short introduction, and again, just open up to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. It's certainly been a difficult year for libraries, but I'm glad to see that they're all beginning to reopen and do well. So questions, David Dean.
Right, so I think the one other attribute, of course, is the volunteers, which I'm assuming was more difficult for them this year. But I think, how many volunteers have you got generally? And you may not have the answer to that, but I think you've got quite a few across all the libraries, haven't you?
Yes, sorry, I was just on mute. I was just going in to get the figures whilst we were speaking. But yeah, I mean, on an average month, kind of pre-lockdown, it's normally about 300 per month. Yeah, just looking at last year's figures, we had 304 active volunteers in our libraries. Numbers have dropped at the moment. They've dropped quite considerably, but what we are starting to see, and particularly at the moment as we recover, is a lot of our volunteers are returning, a lot of doing new things in terms of online provision and online activities, or updating kind of some of our web content, particularly around our heritage services. So what we have been doing through the pandemic is keeping in touch with our volunteers regularly. So where it wasn't safe, for example, for them to come in and contribute, we were making sure that they were kept in touch with. We were looking at opportunities that they could undertake when it's safe to do so. So we feel, although the numbers have dropped off, we feel that there'll be quite a strong response. And whilst we might not get back to the 300 mark, we think we'll definitely be a good way along that, and that's already started straight away.
It's an astounding number. It's quite incredible. So that's testament to them and to the council's strategy to get them on board and keep them on board.
Okay, excellent. We'll go to Anthony Fairclough, then Nick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Anthony, for the report. I wanted to ask about Para 2.54 and the reference to the staffless environment. Now, this was something that turned up at one of the future saving provisions in the 2020 budget round, and at the time a full equality impact assessment wasn't given with the the papers. I'm presuming, however, now that there probably is one somewhere, and I wonder if it might be, this might be a question for Rosie maybe, but it might be shared with the panel after this meeting. But I just wondered, in reality, especially given Councillor Dean's reference to all the volunteers and all the great things that the report talks about, which obviously require people to support the library users, I presume staffless doesn't mean nobody there. It probably means just volunteers. But I just wanted sort of an assurance about that, and maybe any more comments you have on that. And my second question was the reference to West Barnes Library and Crossrail 2, and given the likelihood of Crossrail 2 going ahead seems to, well, be a long time in the future, if at all. I wondered what the plan was, if there's a plan B, as it were. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just with regards to the equalities impact assessment for the staffless library, so that has been produced, and apologies, I thought it had been included in the packs before, but I'll check that and make sure that it gets circulated around to the committee members tonight. Just with regards to the staffless provision, so at the moment, probably just going back further back, probably about 5-6 years ago, we had a savings proposal at that time around kind of removing the kind of library staff for certain kind of what we call off-peak hours. So these are the kind of lowest demand hours at our 4 branch libraries. And then those hours at the moment, there's a basic kind of security guard provision, which is provided, which is supplemented by volunteers and other staff when available as well. This savings proposal is particularly around removing the security guard provision during those hours, so it's a kind of a like for like replacement in some ways. So it does mean that if volunteers are unavailable or staff are unavailable, then we would be working in a completely staffless environment or people-based environment. And we've just actually been implementing or installing the equipment that will be going into the 4 branches to support with that. So it's quite sophisticated technology. Use your cards to access and your PIN number. And there's a whole kind of raft of different kind of CCTV systems and surveillance systems inside, just to monitor the safety, and a lot of instructions for customers about if there are any issues. It's quite commonplace technology now, or I should say it's increasingly commonplace technology in public libraries across England, and there are at least a good handful of London boroughs that have already implemented this, and we're learning from them around kind of any issues and how they've resolved them. In terms of the saving, as you said, the saving actually isn't due to be implemented till next April, so we're using this, what is just under a year now, to be able to trial and test that and really ensure that we iron out any issues prior to that time. But as I said, it may be that we'll be working in staffless environments in certain times, and obviously the equalities impact assessment emphasizes that, but this is more about replacing or reducing our security guard contract replacement than actual kind of library staff reductions. And then just on the point around West Barnes Library, so we started to undertake work actually because prior to the pandemic, we'd had some fruitful conversations, colleagues in sustainable communities and kind of productive conversations, and kind of really indicating that the kind of opportunity to develop West Barnes was back on the table, regardless of the kind of Crossrail 2 impact. So we had undertaken some of the work again to start preparing that ready for market. Obviously then the pandemic came into place, and we've kind of been responding to a lot of the recovery work on that, and in line with kind of other kind of building based projects, we've kind of put that on pause to review as to look at in terms of the impact on the property market, and we'll be looking at kind of making some kind of recommendations and around that to cabinet probably later in the summer. James may want to come in and add something else to that if I haven't covered anything there.
Thanks, Andy, and thank you, Chair. The only thing I would really add is that we're evaluating the state of the market, just to, as Anthony mentioned. some elements of the property market are quite buoyant, others are lagging behind, but we'll be monitoring that and concluding towards the summer, not just for the West Barnes Library, but for a range of sites with a market view on when's the best time to release them.
Okay, thank you. Nick Draper.
Not a question at all, just a comment really to say, understanding how incredibly hard it's been on the libraries, to say thank you to the staff who've been working through it. Particularly at times when they've been finding things to do. And speaking personally, I've been brought back into the service virtually. I still haven't persuaded the security guard at Mitcham Library to sing the wheels on the bus, but I've got to say that it really is lovely to be made so very, very welcome by the permanent staff. And thank you very much indeed, Anthony. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Geraldine, do you have anything to ask at this point?
Yes, I did. I wanted to look at the heritage aspect in particular. First of all, to congratulate Sarah Gould in continuing to send out her virtual events and tours and all sorts of entertainment through the Merton Memories library. What was it called? I don't know. Well, the Merton Memories site, which I know that my residents in Pigs really appreciate, especially, dare I say, some of the more mature members who remember back in the day and really appreciate it. The last one in particular, the ex-postie one, I know I've got several ex-posties in Pigs Marsh who were absolutely, on there straight away volunteering to take part in that project. So thank you for that. But on the other side, regarding heritage, what does worry me a little bit is more on the planning side, and about the kind of monitoring and protection of our heritage sites, which for the past few years now, before the pandemic and everything, has been reduced down to, I think it's half a post in that role. And it does really worry me that they get a bit overwhelmed with the amount of monitoring and, as I say, protection of our many heritage sites around the borough. And I'm just hoping that there might be any consideration of perhaps taking on, another member or two of staff for that area to take on a bit of the load.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Stamford. I mean, the kind of the conservation and monitoring side kind of sits sits across departments. So we work very closely with our conservation colleagues, and obviously try to support them in certainly in doing some of the research and the identifying and linking into other groups. With regards to resourcing, obviously we're in particularly challenging times. It's not a budget that I oversee, so just wonder if either kind of Chris or James wanted to just come in and comment on that at all.
I could just, the conservation officer sits in the development control team and has their role both in advising on planning applications, looking at enforcement, but also doing things like the local listing applications throughout the year. I think today we've sort of felt, Geraldine, that it was manageable. I think that in these constrained spending time, is it something that we also look to other officers within the development control team to pick up the mantle in some of those and seek perhaps guidance from Jill Tyndall, who's the officer. But if there are any specific instances, very happy outside this meeting to pick those up with you, but no plans at this moment in time to expand that role. But it is something that we do sort of move forward and work across the team. That's why the heritage assets include the sort of the local listing elements within the plan. And there's been some sort of notable successes, the likes of the chapter house, etc., in recent years.
Okay, thank you for that. If it's quick, David, you can have one final one.
Just on libraries, and it's the statement really. Mitcham Library is an outstanding building, and it's very central, and it's very obvious that it's a library. And I've heard what people have said about buildings, etc., tonight and in the past. And I think it's absolutely critical that this always remains a library, because it is perfect in every way. And to move it to some dull building, somewhere that's not very central, would emotionally not be very good. And I don't think it'd be good for the service. So don't need an answer to that, but clearly that library is fantastic.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Interesting comment. I've heard those same rumours about potential loss of Mitcham Library. So I don't know if Anthony has a quick response, or if that's to be waited for another time.
Just quick comment, chairs. We have no plans or proposals around Mitcham Library at the moment. We're just continuing to work on the site. If there were to any plans, we'd certainly be bringing them back. But as it stands, we're continuing to deliver there. And as Councillor Dean said, it's a very well used, very popular library. I was only there today myself and saw for my own eyes how well it's used. Yeah, I mean, like with all libraries, it's just about ensuring that we're getting the reach into the communities. And Mitcham has probably struggled a little bit more in the pandemic, actually, in terms of customer numbers. But that's part of our ongoing outreach work. But certainly we haven't got any kind of plans or proposals around Mitcham Library at present.
Okay. Excellent. That's good to hear. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for the report and answering the questions. So we'll move on next to item 7, which is an update report on GLL Leisure, which is quite personal timing, I think. So I understand that this is either Chris Lee or John Bosley who wants to give a quick update on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair, in respect to this. This is just a quick update in terms of the impacts of COVID, how we've managed with GLL over this period, and our current plans for recovering the business following the lifted restrictions. So at this stage now, we are currently going through a process of opening up our 3 leisure centers that have been closed for a significant period over this time. And we are, initially we have been opening up the leisure centers for single use and householders, including swimming. We've had some encouraging signs in terms of access to those locations and use by our residents. And it's been going quite in a positive direction. We have regular meetings with our service provider to maintain that. In 2.9 of the report is a simple table extracted from some regular complex analysis we do about attendance, which just gives an indication of some of the growth that we have seen as compared to the previous reopening phase that we had following the November lockdown period in December when we reopened the facilities. We've also had on the weekend, we've had pool usage up to 88% of capacity, which has been very positive. And we're looking forward to in this month when we can move to having we can have activities on with the group activities in our facilities and reopen the facilities to their full potential. And that is showing a positive movement there. We've also been regularly tracking our memberships, and we have had more positive membership subscriptions than people who have left membership with GLL, and that's been very positive in terms of our overall business recovery. The important thing within this report is probably the narrative in terms of the agreement and the degree of financial support we have provided GLL, and that's in section 4, which has a timetable and a summary of the actions. That summarizes how we have progressed quite rapidly, thoroughly, and with great rigor with supporting GLL through this this very difficult period. This outlines the financial values that have been supported GLL during this difficult period, and provides further assurance that we will be receiving these monies back over the longer contract period. In relation to the most recent funding that was agreed in February, where we had the Sport England National Recovery Fund, which relates to around £400,000 in terms of funding for GLL for that recovery. And what that allows us to do is it allows us into Q3, around the September-October period, to ensure that we are moving back to the normal model, where we will be receiving our monthly fee from that basis, and the monthly management fee will be fully recovered from that time, which is quite is a quick turnaround in terms of that, and that will allow us to then move into what is outlined in 5.2, where the grant total over this period, where we will receive 100% of the operating surplus until those fees, those funds that we made available are repaid in terms of this contract. What this has done is ensured that we can operate these facilities, and we have had no disjoint in terms of the operation. We didn't have to mothball the facilities. We were able to come out of recovery quite quickly and have a very good and sustained offer for our communities quite quickly. That will be invaluable going forward, as we will be at the forefront of being able to offer a wider range of leisure activities for our communities quite rapidly. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, John. That's a good update. David Dean, first question, and Anthony.
Yes, so there's one small question, or more of a statement, and one larger question. The small question really up front is there's nothing in this report about allowing users to use cash, and it's really not much of a question, it's a statement. I don't think that any public service should refuse entrance for residents because they've got cash but not credit. And I don't think we should ever do away with cash, and I think it's unacceptable. So if you can comment on that, but in the positive, on how that's going to change. I think the other thing really is about GLL as an organization, because although they may seem as if they have some issues, of course, all of the investment, all the balance sheet is within Merton, and it's just about operations. So my question really is, I'd like to see in future reports, how they are managed revenue-wise, because I couldn't find too much about them, and I'd be keen to know if they're having a good year or a bad year. And I'd also be keen to know if they've been furloughing staff, so I can try to understand why we're paying them if they can get their staff furloughed, and if all of the balance sheet is Merton's.
Okay, in terms of cash, at this stage, it is part of, and we have addressed this issue in the past in terms of providing where some facilities were proposed to move to a cashless system. And we have addressed that where we had facilities using the cafe where we were able to take cash and ensure that service users can present cash as well. During this period of COVID, it's a necessary restriction to minimize the handling of risk in terms of users coming into the facility. So that's why the cashless system is in process at the minute. It isn't by stealth. It is just part of our operating a COVID safe principle. There are many open, commercial businesses out there which traditionally took cash and now don't take cash during COVID because they've moved to cashless systems and this is just about managing COVID safely. We don't expect by stealth to get rid of cash management because there are times where that is required, and there are ways around that where we can manage that safely once that has been de-risked out of the operational model. In terms of GLL as a business and how they have been managing as a business, I think it has been a very significant period of risk. What we have done as Merton is we have led London as a whole by collectively meeting with all of the London boroughs that have contractual relationships with GLL to ensure that we have the truth, what you were discussing in terms of what's on their P&L, what's sitting in the background, how viable they are as a business before we made intelligent decisions on their viability longer term and their ability to deliver these services. These were led by Chris Lee, and he may want to contribute to it, but these were very important conversations to give us the trust that we were doing the right thing in this process, because acutely right, which is ultimately these are our facilities and they sit and trust with us. If we were to have that hiccup or that interruption in service, we calculated quite rapidly that it would cost us a lot more money to suspend that, to take these services on board and pump prime that again to reinitiate that as a council offer than to continue with this support. So we did a lot of rigor in terms of that. We have open book accounting with GLL. We are able to see every nuance line within their accounts to ensure that we're not double paying for things in terms of the amount that they have of staff that they have furloughed, they have used to the advantage any government funded scheme prior to us committing any monies in respect to that. And that's part of the rigor of the process that we did following the PPNs 02/20 and 04/20 and the variation to the contract that we initiated at the very early stages of this process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. We'll go to Anthony next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if I could just confirm sort of the monies that they've had and the status of those monies. So I think I make it. They've had about 570,000 in repayable grants.
Yeah.
They've had about 840k in terms of relief from paying monthly income, but I'm not sure if that's added to the repayable element. And I think I'm right in saying that the Sport England National Recovery Fund is in addition to that, although I could be wrong. So that's another 400,000 or so. In addition, they've at least had some staff on furlough as well, albeit not all of them. That amount, does it equate to the level of income that they would have expected to gain from Merton's residents during the same time period. Is that the calculation? Because John, you mentioned obviously the cost to Merton of mothballing everything if that was the alternative. What's the measure here? Is the measure here what GLL would have got from residents, or is the measure something else?
Yeah,
sorry, very quickly, and just confirming that the relief, can we recover the relief monies or just the grant monies?
So the grant money is what we will be recovering, not the relief monies. In essence, that business was dissipated due to COVID, and that is in alignment with PPN 02/20 and hence 04/20, which is the guidance from government in terms of providing that relief during COVID. And that ensures that we operate from a sensible position when they're able to contribute to that. We, as part of a figure that isn't within here, and that is highlighted within the financial summary here, we have offset some of the lost income through, was partially recoverable through the through monies from the government, but that was paid in a lump sum to the council as a whole. But there are monies within that have contributed to mitigating those that lost income that we were budgeted for. So in totality though, yes, you are looking at the significance of the operating costs for these facilities. So all of those values rolled together would be the normal standard year in terms of operating. Well, a bit less than that, but there is a very high revenue stream associated with these activities. But what we have been doing is ensuring that we minimize those risks as much as reasonably as practicable, just to keep it buoyant, so we could then initiate once we were in the recovery stage rather than the business continuity stage.
And just therefore, very quickly, I think my understanding is right, does that therefore include some level of profit that they would have intended? Or is it simply the operating costs?
It's just operating costs. So the profit is its loss is foregone until we get into a balanced footing.
Yeah, thank you, John. So there were some important points there, and I'm glad that we've managed to keep the service going, and I'm glad it's beginning to get back to normal. Geraldine, do you have any questions to ask about this measure issue?
No, thank you. No.
Thank you, Geraldine. I suppose a quick comment from me. I suppose one thing that will help recovery is if we can somehow recruit lots more members to the leisure centres. So maybe something that the council could encourage its own staff to do, given that we have a lot of staff that work quite close, and when we get back to normal, maybe we can encourage that, and maybe council members as well. Maybe we should all join. Maybe that's just an idea I'll leave floating out there. Yeah, well, thank you for that, John. We'll move on to item 8 now, which is performance monitoring. Now, we don't have our performance monitoring lead with us, who was Ben Butler. So in that respect, I'll just go straight to Chris Lee, please, to highlight in the usual manner 3 different KPIs that you want to flag for attention. Thank you.
Yeah, before I do that, just to add something on the GLL contract, which is that John mentioned the London-wide discussions that we had, and it was very clear in those meetings with London Borough clients of GLL that we enjoy probably the best contract across London, and I think that's testament to John's division's work, and in particular the work done by Christine Parslow, because the relationship that we built up with GLL and the contract that we originally had but then renegotiated put us in a very good position. And I think it was very important that we sustained this relationship with GLL, because now we can go on in terms of not just providing high quality leisure centre services to the residents of the borough, but also generating a surplus and a return to the council taxpayer, which is a position that very few of our London Borough neighbours right across London enjoy in anything like this way, shape or form. So I think it's worth just noting that. In terms of performance, Chair, I didn't have three particular areas to pick out. I was just going to open it up to questions, but worth noting that this report is now 2 months out of date. We're just awaiting the end of year performance figures as at the end of April, and some of the areas will have improved. I know that planning performance, apart from planning enforcement, have all met their target or exceeded it based on the most recent figures, but we're eagerly awaiting the end of year figures in order to assess the final outturn. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. David Dean. You said you had a question earlier.
Well, of course I did. It's I don't want an answer because it will waste your time. But for the 132nd month in a row, this council has missed its recycling target. And I think for your own respect, because I'm only going to get more critical and, you know, reduce your target and please stop whoever does your Twitter talking about the ambitions, because the ambitions are rubbish. I know they are because the legal officer doesn't phone me to say, stop criticising council officers. You have missed those targets by 10%. This is a political structure to make out that the system is better than the old system. So don't answer me because you're wasting your time. Please change your objectives for recycling and put them down to 40%, because that's as far as Merton has ever achieved and will ever achieve.
I don't know if you want to take that as a comment or a question, Chris. I'll leave that one up to your own choice there.
Well, I suppose it has invited a comment, and the target, I believe, will be changing for this year, but that's more a reflection of the harsh reality of the plateau that we've reached in terms of recycling performance, partly impacted by COVID, and I've gone into the detail of that in the past in terms of the shift in the changing nature of the waste that we have in the household waste bin now due to home working. But that doesn't nullify our ambition. It doesn't dent our ambition and our aspiration to drive up recycling. We're at the highest level we've ever had in the borough. That's a real success of the wheel bin collection and the fortnightly collection, the 100% coverage of food waste. No shame in that whatsoever. And we are ambitious to continue to drive it forward. The target was ambitious. No shame in that, but we will continue to strive to improve and increase the recycling rate in future years, starting in the last week for this financial year.
Okay, thank you. Nick Draper's waving at me. Nick Draper.
Can I say how very grateful I am to Councillor David Dean, because he's given me the opportunity to quote Homer Simpson once again. Homer, speaking to Lisa, says, Lisa, I'm not going to do the accent, Lisa, you tried and you failed. And the moral of the story is never try. We keep on trying. We're going to get there. We will get there. Thank you.
Okay, so no question there either. Okay, well, I have a question. It's about some of the data sets where it says data only. Is that due to a glitch, or is that due to numbers being withheld for some reason?
No, that's where we've set an indicator in order to collect data just for information purposes rather than setting a target. So, for example, planning application volume is an interesting indicator to monitor. It's a barometer of economic development activity in the borough, but it's not appropriate to set a target necessarily because it's more a fluctuation of the economy rather than one that we want to influence either way.
Okay, thank you. And I'll add another one. I usually ask about parking. Do you have the latest figures for parking income? Has it actually improved or got closer to target, or was that target woefully overestimated? Because the original target would have been an all-time record. Given what year we've had, it was never going to be realistic.
I mean, the target was set pre-COVID, and it's no surprise that parking income has been massively affected. The impact on transport, movement of the public during lockdown has impacted on parking income, both residence permits, P&D, and some of the income that the council benefits from in terms of ANPR income, moving traffic offences. We're starting to see a slight shift in that because of motorist behaviour as we ease out of lockdown, but I think it will be some time before that gets anywhere near the sort of income level that we used to see pre-COVID.
Okay, thank you. Geraldine, would you like to ask any questions about the performance indicators?
No, thank you.
Thank you for that. Well, I don't think I have any more questions for today on that front. So we'll move on to, unless anybody's going to flag them down, no. Move on to agenda item 9, which is topic suggestions. Now, we don't actually have that for this meeting because that's going to come in June at the topic workshop, which will be a virtual meeting because those workshops are allowed to be virtual because it's an internal meeting. So any final suggestions that you have between now and early June, please let Rosie know so we can put it into the packs that we can all view then. In terms of topic suggestions though, I've been reminded that we do have a meeting scheduled of this panel late June, I think it's the 24th of June, which is when the all clear in theory is meant to be, and we go back to mostly normal. Therefore, the meeting will be in person. So 2 points I want to ask everybody. As it's likely to be in person, what do people think of being in the committee room, or would they prefer to be in the council chamber if we can arrange it? Because I'm conscious that some people will be a bit nervous going back to a fully tightly enclosed room with lots of people packed in. What do people think to the idea of using the council chamber? And we'll put that to Dem Services if you agree. Any comments on that? Dave Ward.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think if possible, we try to use the council chamber, or if not, 2 of the committee rooms with the partitions out of the way so that we can sit further apart. Thank you.
Excellent. Nick Draper.
Yeah, I'm not too bothered either way. I'm just thinking, seeing as what John Bose is here, that we've got some fantastic parks. It's going to get hot in the summer. Why don't we take the meetings outside if we can?
Interesting idea. We'll have to check with Dem Services if that's allowed. I'll have to check about that. Good idea. We'll look into that. Okay, so that's that question. And the other part of the topic suggestion is normally we like to give Dem Services and the office, senior officers a bit of a steer as to at least one item to go on that agenda, because there won't be enough time on the topic workshops to that meeting to get any reports done. So I don't know if anybody on this meeting had any initial ideas for a topic to be heard at that June meeting. We didn't have that meeting last year, so we can't go by that one. And the year before, the June meeting considered one of the parking tax increase rounds that we had. So I don't know if anybody had any ideas. One that I had was a review of COVID transport measures, because by then we should have had a bit of a steer and handle on school streets and some of the things like that, and if they've worked, and any future plans that council may want to implement traffic measures. So that's one idea, but open to suggestions. David Dean.
I think it's a very good idea, Dan. I think the other thing to look at is sport, both indoor and outdoor. I know that central government and Sport for England and other bodies have been writing to councillors and council officers about the need to get people back out to sport. I'd be keen to understand the outdoor sporting provision, what the longer term plans are, and what sort of percentage of people are going to be using Merton sporting facilities.
Okay, we'll think about that as well. This might be a good point to ask officers if there's anything that's coming up on their radar that they would like us to look at. So this might be a question for Chris Lee.
Yeah, there's nothing immediate that springs to mind, but given some time, I'm sure we could come up with a short list of suggested topics. I hadn't planned anything in advance of this meeting, Chair.
Okay, otherwise we'll be in touch afterwards. Okay, then I'll pick that up offline with Councillor Mundy because he'll be back in post by that point. And on that note, that brings the end to the meeting at just 9:10. Have a good rest of the evening, everybody. I'm now going to go for my 1 hour of active travel and get my 10,000 steps up for the 162nd day in a row. Good night, everyone.
Well done, Chair. Thank you very
Good night.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.